Hello everyone, welcome to the first video of Gordon's Grammar Cats lecture series. My name's Gordon Misko. I am Associate Professor and Assistant Director of the Master's TESOL program at Kanda University of International Studies, where I teach a graduate course on pedagogical grammar. In this series of videos, we'll use phrase structure rules to diagram different English sentence patterns. And in doing so, we'll create what are called syntax trees, also known as grammar trees. The phrase structure rules that we'll use to produce the various syntax trees are associated with the generative grammar tradition. I won't go into any detail about generative grammar theory, just to say that we can use generative principles to diagram or map the underlying structures of English sentences. And in doing so, we can show how these structures enable us to produce or generate particular English sentences, hence generative grammar. I should disclose here that my principal area of research is not actually in generative grammar. It's in functional linguistics, but over the years, I've found grammar trees to be quite useful in helping to create a kind of mental representation or visualization of English syntax. Also, as I hope you'll agree, these grammar trees can actually be quite fun to create. Think of it like solving puzzles. But one complaint about grammar trees is that they can appear, well, rather complex, as you can see here. Another criticism of generative grammar is that the sentences that are diagrammed are often contrived and decontextualized inventions for the purpose of illustrating rules rather than providing meaningful insight into the social or discourse functions of language. The surface structure of this sentence here, for example, shown in red, is the kids put away their toys before they went to bed. You don't have to have children to know that this is not a commonly uttered sentence. So in this series of lectures, I've made a special effort to ensure that the sentences we will diagram were derived from real, authentic communicative events. Take this diagram, for example. The sentence surface structure is Ruby, one of my cats, spun records after she had her dinner. And as we can see, this sentence is derived from an authentic social context. Spinning records, after all, is something that Ruby occasionally likes to do after dinner. So she was supremely helpful in generating this particular sentence. Thank you, Ruby. And so with the help of Ruby and her brother Hamish, I will take you through the phrase structure rules step by step. And at the end of the videos, you'll see I've also provided some exercises with answer keys for you to practice making your own trees. The phrase structure rules that we will use are from chapters 5 and 6 of the third edition of the grammar book by Diane Larson Freeman and Marion Celsi Murcia. The full reference is here at the bottom of the screen. And in this particular tutorial, we'll diagram the first 2 of the 7 so-called basic English sentence patterns. And of course, the S is for subject, the V for verb, the C is for complement, the O for object, and the P here is for the prepositional phrase. For those of you who have taught or studied English grammar in the Japanese context, where I happen to be now, you'll be very familiar with the first 5 patterns. They are called in Japanese gobunke, or the 5 basic English sentence patterns. And they're used to introduce English grammar in Japanese schools. The 6th and 7th patterns are generally not taught in Japan as distinct grammatical constructions, but many grammars do list them as separate patterns, and so we'll follow convention and do the same here. And in this first lecture series, or the first lecture of this series, we'll look only at the first 2 sentence patterns. So let's get started. The first sentence we will look at contains only the minimal constituents necessary to form a sentence, that is, a subject and a verb. And as you can see here, Hamish and Ruby, like other cats, very much like to sleep. So, they slept is the very simple sentence we will diagram first. We begin growing our tree with the most basic syntactic element, which is S for sentence. And as we all know, sentences are comprised of two basic elements, subjects and predicates. Any subject must contain an obligatory element called a noun phrase, abbreviated here as an NP. Now, we say noun phrase rather than just noun to account for the fact that nouns often co-occur with other elements, such as determiners like a and the, or my and your. But here we're concerned simply with the noun category pronoun, which we will abbreviate as PRO to generate the particular lexical item they. So now on to the predicate. To account for the remaining elements of the sentence, we need to generate the verb sleep, and we also need to signal that the verb is in the past tense. To do this, we'll use the two categories, auxiliary and verb phrase. So first, the auxiliary. This category actually brings together all the additional or extra information about a verb phrase. The auxiliary is a rich area of English grammar. It collects together all sorts of information about a verb, such as its tense, its aspect, simple, progressive, or perfect, its mood, imperative, interrogative, as well as modality, including modal verbs such as must and should, which are also aptly referred to as auxiliary verbs. But in this sentence, we only need to account for tense, which we will abbreviate here as T, and we'll indicate that it is the past tense that is at play here. So let's now turn to the other constituent of the predicate, the verb phrase. If the auxiliary is used to describe the extra information about the verb, then the verb phrase is used to describe the verb itself. And here we have the simplest of verb phrases containing only the verb sleep. So we will abbreviate verb as V to generate the particular lexical item, sleep. And we can now complete our tree by indicating that the tense is conveyed in the verb sleep. So there we have it, our first sentence tree diagram. You'll notice that this sentence structure is realized by a particular type of verbs called intransitive verbs. And these, of course, are verbs that do not require an object. Other intransitive verbs are listed here. Please note that the same verb may fit multiple categories depending on their meaning or use. The verb walk, for example, is commonly used as an intransitive verb in I walked, and perhaps with an optional prepositional phrase in I walked to the store. But it can also be used as a transitive verb in, for example, I walked the dog. So such verbs should not be thought of in terms of one-to-one correspondences with their structural categories. The second sentence pattern we will look at is subject-verb complement. And the photo I will use for inspiration is of Hamish the cat in front of the fake fireplace. The sentence we will use is the rather obvious one. He is relaxed. Like the previous sentence pattern, this one is also realized by a particular category of verbs. The type of verb at stake here is the copular verb, which are also called linking verbs. These verbs are used to join or link a subject with a complement in the form of an adjective or noun. So unlike a grammatical object of a sentence, which we will look at in a future video, a complement simply provides more information about a person or thing. For example, he is relaxed. He is a cat. In these instances, relaxed and cat are features or characteristics of the subject, Hamish. To diagram our sentence, we will begin with our S for sentence. In subject position, we have our obligatory NP, which is realized by the proper noun Hamish. Expanding the predicate, we have our auxiliary and verb phrase constituents. In the auxiliary, we will need to account for tense, which this time is present. Turning to the VP, we have two elements to account for. The first is the copular verb be, which we will abbreviate as COP to produce be. We will then need to attach the tense marker to the be verb. Now we need an adjective phrase, which is abbreviated here as AP, and it is comprised of an obligatory adjective from which we can generate the particular lexical item relaxed. So that is the SVC pattern, and as I mentioned earlier, the complement can be an adjective, as it is here, or it can be a noun. So let's see what a noun in the SVC pattern would look like. On the left, we have the sentence we just diagrammed, and on the right, we have a sentence with a noun phrase, a relaxed cat, rather than an adjective as its complement. As you can see, the two sentence diagrams are the same, except that when we elaborate the verb phrase, instead of an AP or an adjective phrase, we have an NP or a noun phrase. And in this particular NP, we happen to have three elements to account for. First, there is the article a, which is a type of determiner, and we will abbreviate that as DET to produce the particular determiner a. Next, we have an AP, or adjective phrase, to account for. And we have, of course, the particular adjective, relaxed. Finally, we have our main element, a noun from which we can get cat. So as you can see, the SVC pattern, a complement can be either an adjective phrase or it can be a noun phrase. But the subject and complement must be connected by a particular copular verb. And so here are some other copular verbs. Again, please note that these verbs may belong to different categories depending on their meaning and use. The verb taste, for example, may be a copular verb in it tastes good, or a transitive verb in I tasted the wine. So there are the first two of these seven sentence patterns. Before turning to the practice exercises, I should disclose that I did obtain permission to use the photos shown in this video. As you can see here on the consent form signed by both Hamish and Ruby. Thank you, Hamish and Ruby. All right, so here are the tree diagram practice exercises. Please pause the video here to complete the tree diagrams. And you can now check your answers. I hope you enjoyed the first video of this series. Thank you for watching.